When I was young, the forest behind our house became my sanctuary. It was dense, with towering pines and winding paths that led to hidden clearings. The woods offered a quiet escape from the chaos of daily life. One evening, as dusk settled, I wandered deeper than usual, driven by a sense of adventure. The air was crisp, and the full moon cast long shadows on the forest floor, creating an eerie yet mesmerizing atmosphere. As I ventured further, I stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin. Its wooden frame was rotting, and the windows were broken, giving it a haunting appearance. Suddenly, I heard my name being called. The voice was slow and raspy, like wind whispering through the trees. I turned around, expecting to see my brother, or one of my friends, but there was no one.
Jonathan!
The voice came again, and more insistent. It seemed to come from the direction of the cabin. My heart raced as I moved closer, the dilapidated structure creaking under the weight of time. Curiosity overcame my fear, and I peered through a broken window. Inside, darkness swallowed the room, but the voice called out once more.
Do you have anything delicious?
"Who are you? How did you get in there?" I asked, my voice trembling.
If you give me something delicious, I'll reward you,
the voice replied. All I had were some candies in my pocket. Cautiously, I unwrapped a piece and tossed it through the window. There was a moment of silence before I heard the sound of something being unwrapped and eaten. Then a small, shining object flew out of the darkness, landing at my feet. It was a tiny golden coin, unlike anything I had ever seen. Over the next few weeks, I visited the cabin regularly, each time bringing something new: fruit, bread, even small toys. Each offering was met with the same reward, a golden coin, each one slightly different, but all unmistakably valuable. I kept this secret, fearing that my parents or anyone else would put an end to my mysterious exchanges. As time passed, I realized the voice only appeared on nights of the full moon. And the rewards changed too. Small animals, insects, anything alive brought larger, more intricate coins. The voice, always hungry for more, grew bolder with its requests. One night, I found a stray cat wandering near our house. I hesitated, but eventually decided to offer it to the voice. The reward was a gold nugget, larger than any coin I had received before. I was both thrilled and horrified. Then, one of our neighbors, an old man who often roamed the forest, went missing. It happened around the same time I brought the cat to the cabin. That night, I received a gold bracelet, its weight heavy in my hand and on my conscience. The coincidence was too disturbing to ignore. Years went by, and I inherited the family house. I continued to visit the cabin, though my trips became less frequent. Workers and wanderers occasionally vanished, always around the full moon. Each disappearance brought me a new piece of gold, but also a growing sense of dread. The forest is still my sanctuary, but it holds a dark secret. The cabin remains, a place of whispers and shadows, where the past and the present intertwine. On full moon nights, I sometimes hear my name called from the depths of the woods, a chilling reminder of the bargains made and the price paid. The gold I collected over the years remained hidden, buried deep within the woods. No one knew about my secret, and I planned to keep it that way. The wealth was a blessing and a curse, a constant reminder of the dark pact I had made. As I grew older, the forest seemed to grow darker, the trees whispering secrets only I could understand. The weight of what I had done pressed heavily on me, and I found it increasingly difficult to sleep at night. The voice in the cabin haunted my dreams, always demanding more, always wanting something new. One particularly cold winter, a young woman from the neighboring town went missing. Search parties combed the forest, their voices echoing through the trees, but they found nothing. I knew where she had gone, and the guilt nearly consumed me. That night I didn't go to the cabin. I couldn't bring myself to face the voice again. Days turned into weeks, and the snow began to thaw. One evening, as the full moon rose, I heard my name once more.
Jonathan!
The voice was louder, more insistent, cutting through the silence of the night. I tried to ignore it, but the pull was too strong. Reluctantly, I made my way back to the cabin.
Do you have anything delicious?
The voice asked, sounding almost desperate. I have nothing left to give, I replied, my voice trembling. You've taken everything. There was a long pause, and then the voice spoke again, softer this time.
There is always more to give, Jonathan. Always.
I knew then what the voice wanted, and the realization sent a chill down my spine. The gold, the coins, the wealth. It had all come at a terrible price. The voice was never satisfied, always hungry for more. And now, it wanted the one thing I had left to offer, myself. With a heavy heart, I stepped inside the cabin for the first time. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the darkness seemed to swallow me whole. The voice whispered in my ear.
Thank you, Jonathan. You have been very delicious.
In that moment, I understood the true nature of the cabin and the voice within. It was a hunger that could never be sated, a darkness that consumed all who entered. And as the door closed behind me, I knew I would never leave the forest again. The next morning, the town found my abandoned house and searched the forest, but they never found the cabin. It remained hidden, a dark secret among the trees. And on nights of the full moon, if you listen closely, you might hear a voice calling out, always hungry, always wanting more. And so, the legend of the cabin in the woods grew, a chilling tale told around campfires and whispered in hushed tones. But the truth was far darker than anyone could ever imagine, a secret buried deep within the heart of the forest. I remember that night clearly, a night I would give anything to forget. It started like any other night in my small, creaky house at the edge of town. The wind howled outside, shaking the windows. It was a familiar sound, like a lullaby that usually put me to sleep. But not that night. I woke up to the soft, almost rhythmic sound of footsteps just outside my room. At first, I thought it was a dream, something my imagination had made up from the wind. But as I lay there, eyes half open, I saw a faint shadow move under the door. My heart started beating faster. I wanted to call out to my parents, but something held me back. A deep fear that told me to stay quiet. I turned my head just enough to look through the slit of my slightly open door. What I saw next made my blood run cold. The door swung open silently, and a tall figure stepped in, carrying a heavy sack over his shoulder. In the dim light, I couldn't see his face, but I could tell he was a thief, stealing from our home. He moved with an eerie grace, almost as if he was floating. He went straight to my desk and started pulling items from the sack. My mother's jewelry, my father's laptop, framed family photos. He arranged them carefully, like he was displaying them. My breath caught in my throat as I realized he had been in my parents' room, taking their most precious things. But why was he taking them out and arranging them here? What kind of message was he trying to send? The figure turned towards the wall, his movements slow and deliberate. In the dim light, I saw him dip his fingers into a small bottle of red paint he had taken from the sack and begin to write on the wall. The scratching sound of his fingers against the wallpaper was almost unbearable. He wrote slowly, each letter a smudged streak of red. I shut my eyes tight, pretending to be asleep, praying he wouldn't notice me. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Then, with a final stroke, he finished his message and turned towards my bed. The mattress sagged slightly as he slid underneath, and I felt the eerie chill of his presence directly beneath the bed. I didn't dare move a muscle, barely breathing, my mind racing. What did he write on the wall? Was it a warning? A message? Minutes felt like hours, and hours felt like an eternity. Slowly my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I dared to open them just a sliver. The moonlight filtering through the curtains cast a pale glow on the wall where the message was written. I could barely make out the letters, but I forced myself to read them. "I know you're awake," the writing seemed to whisper. A chill went down my spine as I felt something move under the bed. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed by fear. The words stuck in my mind, each letter etched into my brain. Then, the breathing started. Soft, almost inaudible, but there, right beneath me. I tried to calm my own breath, to match his rhythm, but it was impossible. My breaths were ragged and shallow, while his were slow and steady, like he was waiting. The night dragged on, and I kept my eyes fixed on the message. Every sound, every creak of the house felt louder. I imagined him lying there, waiting for me to make a mistake, to give away that I was awake. I couldn't risk it. As dawn's first light crept into the room, I heard another set of footsteps coming closer. They were hurried and heavy, belonging to my older brother. He burst into the room, and his eyes widened in horror at the sight of the mess and the message on the wall. Before he could react, the figure under my bed moved. In a blur, he was out from under the bed, a swift motion that ended with my brother's unconscious body hitting the floor. The figure turned towards me, and for the first time I saw his face. His face was a mask of shadows, features blurry and changing, but the eyes were clearly human, filled with cruel delight. He leaned in close, his breath warm against my face. "You've been so brave," he whispered, his voice low and eerie. "But the game isn't over yet." He stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my unconscious brother. I stayed there, too scared to move, until the sunlight filled the room, chasing away the shadows and bringing a sense of safety. When I finally dared to move, I rolled out of bed and rushed to my brother's side. He was breathing, thank God, but unconscious. I grabbed the phone and called the police, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights and hurried voices breaking the morning silence. They found the message on the wall, the stolen belongings, and my brother, but the figure was gone, vanished like a shadow in the morning light. The investigation that followed went by in a daze. There were endless questions, but I had no answers. Who was he? Why did he do this? And what did he want with me? The message on the wall haunted me for days, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every shadow seemed sinister, every noise a warning of something dreadful. One night, weeks later, I found a note slipped under my door. It was written in the same red scrawl as the message on my wall. "See you soon," the words taunted. I left that house the next day, moving in with relatives far away. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the fear, the feeling that he was still watching, waiting for the right moment to finish the game. Years have passed, and I've tried to rebuild my life. But every night, as I lie in bed, I still hear those footsteps, feel the shift of weight underneath the bed, and see those chilling words etched into the darkness. I know you're awake. It was an ordinary morning with a serene blue sky and a gentle breeze. But as I glanced out my bedroom window and saw the moving truck next door, something didn't feel right. The new neighbors had arrived. From my window, I saw a man and a woman carrying boxes into the house. They looked like a couple, probably in their early 40s. My eyes drifted to the vacant, upstairs bedroom window of their house, which was directly across from mine. The window was open, and to my surprise, a girl was standing there, looking out. She seemed to be around my age. She noticed me watching and signaled for me to open my window. Curious and a bit confused, I followed along. She leaned out, cupped her hands around her mouth and whispered, "Nice to meet you. I'm Jasmine." I laughed a little, finding the situation odd but intriguing. "Nice to meet you, Jasmine. I'm Logan." She gave a bright, mysterious smile. "Keep your window open," she said, then disappeared from view. I stood there, confused. "Keep my window open?" I whispered to myself. Moments later, she reappeared with something in her hand, and tossed it over. It was a small, folded note, wrapped around a pebble. The pebble hit my window frame and dropped gently onto my bedroom floor. Curious, I picked it up. Written on the top of the note was a single word: open. I unfolded the note. Inside was a message. "Hey, Logan, I'll come over tonight and introduce myself." A strange request, I thought. I wrote back on another piece of paper. "Come over tonight? What do you mean?" I turned around to toss it back, but she was gone. Her window was still open, so I threw the note back, hoping she'd see it. The day went by without anything interesting happening. Evening approached, and my mom informed me that she had invited the new neighbors over for dinner. I assumed this was what Jasmine had meant about coming over tonight. I tried to focus on other things, but my mind kept wandering back to that unusual encounter with her. Just then, my mom called out for me to come down for dinner. I walked downstairs, still caught up in thoughts about Jasmine. As I entered the dining room, I noticed the neighbors had arrived, but there was no sign of Jasmine. Just her parents, sitting quietly at the table. I couldn't hold back my curiosity and asked, "Where's Jasmine?" The man and woman exchanged a glance, their expressions shifting to something I couldn't quite place. The man's voice was firm, almost harsh. "Excuse me? Jasmine, your daughter?" I repeated. The woman covered her mouth with her hands, her face crumpling as tears streamed down her cheeks. The man stood abruptly, his face a mask of grief and anger. "Our daughter died a year ago in an accident. I don't know what kind of cruel joke this is, but it's not funny." They left the house in a hurry, leaving a tense silence in their wake. My mom stared at me, her expression a mix of disbelief and anger. She demanded to know why I would say something like that, and then ordered me to go to my room. I stood there, stunned, and unable to process what had just occurred. I stumbled back to my room, my mind spinning with confusion and fear. I turned on the light and lay on my bed, trying to make sense of it all. Then another pebble hit my window, and a folded note fell softly on the floor. I picked it up with trembling hands and looked out my window. There she was, Jasmine, standing in the darkness of her room. Her face was barely visible in the dim light, but her presence was unmistakable. My heart pounded as I opened the note. The message inside was chilling. "Behind you." At that moment, my lights flickered and went out, plunging my room into darkness. The floorboards behind me creaked, and a cold whisper brushed against my ear. "Logan." Fear gripped me. I spun around, but there was nothing, only darkness and the echo of that whisper. My breath came in short gasps as I fumbled for the light switch. When the lights came back on, my room was empty, but the feeling of dread remained. I raced to my window and looked across to Jasmine's room. She was still there, but now her face was illuminated by the moonlight. Her eyes were dark, almost black, and her skin was a ghostly gray. She looked more like a specter than a living girl. I grabbed a new note and wrote frantically. I tossed it back across the gap, my hands shaking. Jasmine caught it with ease, her movements smooth and unnatural. She unfolded it, read the message, and then her eyes met mine. Her lips moved, forming silent words that I couldn't hear. But I understood. Somehow I knew that Jasmine wasn't just the neighbor's daughter. She was something else, something that shouldn't be here. The next morning I woke up with a sense of unease. Had it all been a nightmare? I hoped so, but the note still lay on my floor, a reminder of the previous night's events. Days passed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I looked out my window, Jasmine's window was open, but she was never there. It was as if she had vanished, leaving only the unsettling memory of our encounter. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a faint tapping at my window. I sat up, heart pounding, and saw a figure standing outside in the moonlight. It was Jasmine, but she looked even more ghostly. Her eyes were hollow, and her skin was pale and almost see-through. I mustered the courage to approach the window. She stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Slowly, she raised a finger to her lips, signaling for silence. Then she pointed behind me. Dread washed over me as I turned around. The darkness seemed to close in, and I felt an icy breath on the back of my neck. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Logan." I bolted from my room, racing down the stairs to my parents. They tried to comfort me, but they couldn't see what I had seen or feel the eerie presence that haunted my every step. I never saw Jasmine again after that night, but her memory and the fear she brought stayed with me. The new neighbors eventually moved away, unable to handle the grief and the strange occurrences that plagued their home. To this day, I keep my window shut, fearing that if I ever open it again, Jasmine might return. And with her, the darkness that whispered my name.